Danke. Schönen guten Abend, herzlich willkommen im Architekturzentrum Wien zu unserem leider letzten Abend in dieser Reihe gemeinsam mit der IBA. Welcome at the Architekturzentrum Wien to our last event in this series, this very nice cooperation with the International Building Exhibition IBA Wien, Social Housing. Actually, if anybody of you hasn't been yet to the exhibition, the final presentation of the IBA Wien, go there at Nordwestbahnhof. I think it's only a few days, few weeks, so it's ending in November. So, 9 days to go. So please go there. It's an excellent exhibition, excellent overview on social housing in Vienna. Today. Or tonight, I'm very happy to welcome Mette Skjold from SLA Architects from Copenhagen. Welcome, Mette. And I would like to start with a quote from SLA. Everywhere our ambition and mission are the same, to design places for life, all life. And I think the important thing in this quote is all life, especially now being in the context of the IBA Wien, so in the context of social housing. I think we, first of all, think about the well-being of humans, but I think at the same time by now we know, or we should know, that we cannot disconnect the needs of humans from other living or non-living beings. We are part of a continuous web, and we will not survive without saving the planet. During the last years, we have been experiencing heat waves, rising air and noise pollution, and the negative impacts of these emissions are not equitably distributed. So ecological justice is part of social justice. We will have to pay more attention to nature in our cities, or to phrase it in technical planning terms, to green and blue infrastructure. That's why this year we are devoting our series with the IBA Wien to the groundbreaking work of landscape architecture. And I'm very pleased that tonight we have SLA with us. It's an outstanding landscape architecture firm. Their projects are shaping a new image of urban nature that is both aesthetically new and biologically diverse, resilient and sustainable. Many of these projects are interwoven with social housing estates. I think that's especially interesting for Vienna and for the context of the IBA Wien. In tonight's event, we will first have a lecture by Mette from SLA, and this will then be followed by a conversation with Lilli, our second guest, who will act as respondent. Thanks a lot, Lilli, for joining us, and I'm very much looking forward to our conversation. But before I introduce both of you, I would like to take the chance to thank Lene Benz, who has been the curator of this series from couple of years now, and you did a great job curating this and coordinating, and I think we should give her a hand at this time. And of course, thanks to the whole team of the AZW helping us every time with these events. And now I would like to invite our partner on stage, Kurt Hofstetter, coordinator from IBA Wien. Welcome, Kurt.
Thank you, Angelika. As you said, it's the last time in a series of quite a few years now. We have been working together. International Building Exhibition, IBA meets Architects, and thank you for curating this with such a nice and interesting way. I think we had a really lot of interesting guests from all of the world, and I personally am very glad that the last time we have in IBA Meet Architects, we have IBA Meet Landscape Architects, which is very important. And when we talk about social housing, I think it's not about only housing. We really try to talk about not only building, but a lot about attitude, about values, about living qualities. And everybody who is in the room, and I see some of the profession, know how hard it has been for so many years to talk about the value of public space, of landscaping, and this has changed in the last years. I'm so happy about that, and it's good to have a lot of young people here, because I think this is exactly the combination, looking at these values and attitudes from a new perspective, and really carrying whatever we can into the future, and using this energy and the potential of, you said natural-based design, I think, is what you're working with, and I'm very glad to hear more about it, because that is what we have to live on in the next years and work with very intensely. So let us take this chance, and I'm thanking you for coming from Denmark, and I'm looking forward to hear your presentation. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Kurt. Before I give the stage to you, Mette, let me briefly introduce you and your office. You are a partner and CEO at SLA Architects in Copenhagen. SLA has been designing open-air public spaces around the world for 30 years now, many of them prize-winning. SLA designs on all scales, citywide master plans, climate adaptation, inner city open spaces or residential green spaces, such as in Denmark's largest social housing estate in Gellerup in Aarhus. I think you will also show that in your lecture. Mette leads SLA's strategic urban planning with emphasis on sustainability and environmental, economic and social terms. Mette is also responsible, and this sounds really very challenging, at the studio for maybe the most complicated stakeholder and involvement processes, the collaboration with residents, public authorities, and different other builders and stakeholders. And I think it's all about these processes in projects like the ones you are showing in a short time. Furthermore, Mette is also chairman of architecture and building policy at Danske Ark and a member of Copenhagen Municipality Business Council. And she has been teaching and lecturing extensively. And I think that's also something which is connecting you to our respondent today, to Lilli, who is also, of course, a very known teacher in Vienna, but is also very active in, let's say, policy making and networking and building up institutions. And yeah. But now, Mette, I'm again very happy that you're here tonight, and I very much looking forward to your lecture. The stage is yours.
Thank you. And a warm thank you to you, Lene. We've been talking since 7 months, and it has not been frequently, but we have been on mail and on online meeting. And thank you very much, Angelica and Kurt, for the kind introduction. It's an honor to be here and to see all these people that is interested in what we do. So I'll do my best. We are a nature-based design studio, and we design places for life, all life. So not only for humans, but also for the flora and the fauna. Because we deeply believe, and we know for a fact, from IPCC's reports, from biodiversity crisis, that we really need to push and to put forward that agenda. Yes, it works. We are a learning and sharing organization on a mission to create better conditions for all life. You could say that I don't know, do you know Sesame Street? I don't know what it's called in German, but the Muppet Show, they have the power of we as a quote. And that's how we work and operate at SLA. So if you are an office clerk, or you are an intern, or you're a senior designer, or a project manager, all people are valued and their contributions to our projects are seen and heard. So from my point of view as a leader, I think the biggest sort of success of SLA is actually to build the studio and the culture around doing this. And of course, we don't do it only ourselves. We collaborate with many different, both knowledge institutions, but also specialists in different fields. This is a project in Denmark. And we also have an obligation as contemporary society to bring forward nature to our children and our next generations. And this is a facility, it's a multi-universe where you can explore the powers of nature. It's called Naturecraft, and it's in Denmark. You can come and visit once. Yeah, so our ambition and eagerness to explore and learn new is present in every project. This is a project, a hospital, where we are adding in trees that is not standing upright, so they are not like vertical, but they are lying down in order to create a better resilient nature and a habitat for different types of fauna. Our work spans from award-winning climate adaptation projects in Copenhagen, the green-blue transformation that I will go through of Denmark's largest social housing estate in Aarhus, the second biggest city of Denmark, and the design of Norway's new government area in Oslo, to urban biodiversity park. That's the picture here. It just in 2021 won the World Landscape of the Year category. And it's a park in Abu Dhabi that actually lowers the temperature, but also filters noise, so people can go outside. And it lowers the temperature and the irrigation, because it's built as a forest with native species. The irrigation cost is, or the irrigation amount of water used is lowered by 40%. Yeah. We are not only architects and designers and planners. We believe in the value proposition on a broad scale, you could say. So we have biologists, we have anthropologists, and then we have a group of specialists that from soil experts to plant experts, to tree experts, to ecosystems experts. So in general, we have the power of we culture, but we also allow in individual training and learning and developing of their passion. And I believe that if you have passion at work, then you can definitely move and do something new and do good. So you could say that with knowledge on nature's ecosystem services and how nature feels and functions for people by design. So that's kind of the equation that all our projects go through. And it goes not linear, so it's a circle one, so it's sort of, but that's kind of our mission put in another way. And our services are manifold. We don't only operate as landscape architects. Around 40% of what we do is on strategic urban planning scale, but also master plans and how to sort of start with actually landscape and nature, which in general is the starting point for our lives, but also for the cities that we live in. And currently we are experiencing a pull on biodiversity, bionet gain, green cover, because, I mean, during COVID, people in general living in cities was almost lying about natural experiences, no? And so it's a huge demand at the moment to sort of have that close to heart, but also close to home in cities all over. And you could say that it's about time that we feel that urge. Yeah, so we also have this is a matrix, but it's just to show you how we collect knowledge and how we try to sort of share knowledge on different papers that we distribute and that we are completely open about across the 3 studios, but also across different, you could say, disciplines or areas where landscape architecture or urban space in general operates. So from microclimate simulation to security, working with this government area in Oslo, you need to sort of security regulate that it doesn't, scream, this is like super Fort Knox, but it's included into the urban fabric or the floor of the city. And we take our own medicine. We go camping. This is the last camp we did it was actually last year, in August 2021. And we debate and meet and talk and invite people in to talk about how they regard nature-based design and why we should do even better. It's almost, it's almost like the Lion King. I feel like singing the Lion King song, the introduction song. Anyways, I won't do it. But this is like just on it's one of, you could say, the basis that we come back to, trying to explain what nature-based design is. And it's not about introducing wolves and mooses. It's not about mimicking nature, but it's about understanding the performance of nature, how it feels and functions, and putting that into design. In general, to create more livable cities. So not only sustainable cities, but livable cities. Yes. And our approach is, not only surface. You have to know what's the growth medium. You have to have a full circle in understanding also the value that is proposed from nature, even from CO2 that is captured in soil over time, the roots, how it's infiltrating, and so forth. So this is just a nice example of a rhizome and a root structure underneath ground. And very often, nature is regarded almost linear. I know this is a circle, but that it's sort of, you put a sprout, you make a seed, and then it matures over time, and then it decays and sort of goes out of system. But what really happens is called ecological succession. And that's the process by which the mix of species and habitat, so the home for habitat, you know what that means, I don't need to explain that, in an area of changes over time. So it's a very robust system. And it always, working nature-based design, working with putting as much nature as we can into all our projects, you always are context-specific. Because you have the dynamics of climate on that specific site, being drought, being heavy rain, being moisture, being whatever happens. Whereas you always also, you have to know what's underneath, what's the soil, what type of growth medium are we working with. And that's how we go about. You could say that cities as well is also a system. It responds to our behavior and need. It changes over time. And the way we work, both in planning but also in urban spaces, is that we look at the hydrological circuit. How is like the system of water in this area? What's the native species? How is that operating? How can we make it resilient so it can actually grow? and how does then the social life respond to that? And then we create synergies between those circles. So it's another way of the circle that I showed before about nature, people, and design. It's another way of regarding it. And this is from a headquarter of a large pharmaceutical company in a little bit outside of Copenhagen center. And they decided to change one of their, you could say, almost fabrication lots, so like a industrial area, into their global headquarter. And when we then planted all these trees in different ages, up to 30 years of age and in different species, one of the trees were not like super relevant for planting. So then we said to the facility manager, but the best you can do, Jan, is to actually put this tree in the park. And he said, well, you know that this is our global headquarter. And we said, yes, we know that. And then he said, well, okay, we'll find a spot far away from the main entrance, and then we can start there. And now they are monitoring the biodiversity. It's increasing, both flora and fauna. And now it's part of their way of maintaining this area. So now you even find it close to the entrances. So it's a way of pushing, you know, almost like Lilli and I just had a brief talk about. It's a way of pushing the aesthetics towards a more robust nature and a more resilient nature, and a much more nature that has like a lot of values in it, where you can listen to a bird, see a butterfly, and so on. I'll go through these 3 cases. And Lilli was selecting the first 2 of them, and then I added the third one. And then I also have like a brief, short presentation of some projects that we've just done in Copenhagen. I will only show projects from Copenhagen and only the realized project. So I'm not showing so many drawings. The first project is in Gellerup, where we in 2015 won a competition for a new park. At that time, it was the largest park we've ever done. And I guess all cities have these types of neighborhoods. You could say it's a very Cartesian way of putting houses on Earth, so to say. And it was. I mean, I guess you can recognize these type of neighborhoods. It's like the heydays of modernism. We all have it. And this is in April 2014. There's around 6,000 residents in this neighborhood. More than 50% is unemployed. There's around 18 nationalities living in this area. And more than 35% is below 18 of age. So just to sum up, there's a lot of capacity for being active, being outdoor, being, caring, maintaining. There's a lot of capacity of people to actually live and make this neighborhood more safe to move around. But this was the case. And I mean, if you were the first one to picnic on this side, you would be quite, that would challenge me. I mean, to take my cloth and go down here and have picnic with my children, that would be challenging, because you would be surveyed from all over, and you would definitely be a first mover. So basically it's saying that this space in between the houses was not like a series of spaces, outdoor spaces or activities. It was, one-dimensional. And really well cut as a lawn. So the idea here was that the social housing union was set off to sell off land in order to create a more diverse offer of houses, but also the city of Aarhus moved 1,000 workplaces into this neighborhood. So the idea was to create a more self-sustained but also a very diverse neighborhood in programming, coming from only social housing. And for the most important issue was that the existing residents, none of them in this, change over time, should be forced to move. So the competition for the park was to make a space for the existing residents. And the concept for doing that, I met actually the engineer that did the technical part of the project, leading the engineer services. He lives like 100 meters away from this area, and he has never visited Gellerup. So it is like an island. So the idea was, how do we open it up? How do we make smaller neighborhoods in order to connect and to sort of make it physical accessible, so it's the easy route, and make it a part of Aarhus. Yes. So in the beginning, it was more like a landscape, a farm in the center. I can't look at the. I don't have any pointer. Anyways, and this is very small. Oh, there's the pointer. Not really. Turn on. That's a good idea. Perfect. But this is the microphone. No? Anyways, it works. Anyways, it started with being a meadow, and then came. I can't see the. I might do like this. No. This is a little bit hard. I'm sorry about that. It started with kind of you could say almost like a village and a farm landscape, and then came the development. The new proposed landscape was then a new base where you actually had the local soil balance on site. We did have to move a lot of soil with meadows and rolling hills, so like kind of the base that it was visible from entrance to entrance, but also that it was coherent, and the blue and the green was connected. And then giving diverse vegetation. I'll get into that later. Yes. So putting in a series of programs, the local rainwater strategy going from north to south, collecting the rainwater, and then connecting that to the path where you actually feel safe and that is illuminated during dark hours. But what we did as sort of a pioneer in this area was that because of the change in infrastructure, the small football field in natural grass was demolished. And you can imagine having so many young people that if you don't have a place to play football, then they will find out something else to do, and maybe not only good things. So the first thing we did for this park was to create an artificial grass football field, soccer field, 11 by 11, illuminated with a stand. So the usage of this football field could be 24/7. So that was quite an harassment. I think it took us around 6 months. And here you can see that that's definitely the first green spot. And here we are in the middle. It's 2017. We haven't planted yet. But some of the trees, the existing trees, due to that we had to move and change the terrain so much, we took them and put them into deposit in order to plant them later. And here is a nice view where people also during construction actually uses the park. And we planted a lot of different species, also species that is exotic. So where the microclimate actually allows, we placed a lot of and planted a lot of exotic species, also edible species for people to enjoy, but also as an homage to all these different nationalities and a sense of home for them. So they were part of selecting, part of understanding, part of learning about these new types of nature that we introduced. Yeah, and this is the image of the different species, of some of them. And you can design spaces for a certain use, but then something else happens. And this is like the end of Ramadan in 2019, and definitely the space is not only designed for this, at least, but it's so nice to see that it can also be used for these type of events as well. And this is a corner of the park. You see a before and after. And the corner is then rainwater managing on surface. It's a green open space, but it's also mobility, so you can access as if you're on wheelchair, if you're on bike, if you're on foot, etc. So sometimes it's about physically opening up these areas, at least it was here in Gellerup. Understanding the soil, for what types of vegetation do you need to have some natural ingredients in order to, level the pH value for the understory and so forward. That was a big part of this project. And then we always go with the client out and select trees. And that's definitely a treat at SLA to go out there. I haven't even done it myself, but I've seen so many pictures of it. And maybe someday I will get to it as well. So we have a close collaboration with plant nurseries in general, in all over Europe. Yeah. And the funny thing is that when we planted these six types of cherry trees, like the day after, there was like bumblebees summing around. So fauna is super fast. Forest pigeon after a week in the pine trees, making a nest, and even under construction there was a big fat rabbit chasing the construction bulldozer around. And this is like a normal day by the lake. And then I have a small video because the project was actually just shown at the Oslo Triennale. So we made a video together with the social housing showing what everyday life is at this park and how it has changed. Yes, there's no sound on it, but then you maybe get a grasp on how it is and how it feels. And this is like he's eating these, it's not blackberries, but it's a blackberry, and it's very kind of, and he says like, well, I don't know if it's edible, but I'll do it anyway. Yeah, and by the lake. Yeah. So Naturecraft is a campus park. It's a research facility in the city center of Copenhagen. The house is designed by C.F. Møller, a Danish architecture firm, doing the buildings, and we won this design competition in 2010. But it has taken quite a while because it's a complex place. The client's vision was to create a new research complex with attractive surroundings, but also inviting and generous to the surrounding neighbors. This is the location of this spot is one of the densest populated areas of Copenhagen. And if you go like 100 years back, it was a grazing common. So that's also a way of looking at how that was actually the soil condition underneath the pavement. Yeah, and one of the reasons we won was that it was generous. So it was inviting in, was opening up. opening up. I mean, before this, the campus was fenced off and not very accessible. But the idea here was to create a series of routes, publicly open, 24/7, both for bikes and pedestrians in general. And here you see a bicyclist. And then also on the rainwater, it's really like in the city center of Copenhagen. It's also collecting rainwater for the neighboring sites, and making it float underneath ground through a natural filter used for the gray water in the house, but also used for irrigation and cooling down the surface during hot days. And it's a meeting spot. There's these small dots where people can meet, both the researchers, going outside, but also people from the neighboring houses and the neighboring city. And this is like it's a long pedestrian and bicyclist bridge. So that allows different types of nature to actually grow and become much more natural in their way of appearance, but also their way of growing. Yeah, and the vegetation aspires from how is a grazing common, what types of nature, what types of species is related to that, and then differed in different types of spaces. So you get like a variety of spaces that you can explore when you visit the site. And this is a view from the front and the main entrance. And here you have a view during dark hours with light. And we also did the light design on this one. And there's also a tendency to illuminate cities too much. And as you see here, the light is more warm, so it's more inviting and still ensures that people can move safely through the site. So the next project is a climate adaptation project that we did it was also a competition we won in Copenhagen. It was a pilot on how to include city nature into a street and a roundabout in order for making the city more resilient towards future heavy rain events. Copenhagen was completely paralyzed during 2000. I think it was the 7th or the 6th of July, 2011, and it costed the city, or the people in the city. It was our tax money, I guess, who to renovate the city. It costed around 1 billion euros. And none of this money was used for making the city more resilient towards the next event. So that, of course, made the city think, what should we do in the future? How should we make the city resilient? Because we cannot have these type of events and these type of costs too many times. And how do we include city nature into the resiliency of the city, but also the hydrological circuit of the city. And for many cities, this is still a fact that nature is something that is outside the city borders. And cities in general is hardscape. And we have learned this, we have operated with this for many, many years. But the way we go about is to include nature into the city in order to create a more livable city, but also on hardcore values. I mean, the utility values, the value proposition of working like this, both embedding CO2 embedded, but also the one we all learned in our school that plants, while they grow, they convert CO2 into oxygen. No? So it's kind of common knowledge. It's not something that we invent, but it's also about creating cleaning air, filtering noise, preventing heat islands, stuff like that, more hardcore facts that this type of nature-based solution can offer to cities. But then there's also like the more softer values, like the amenity values about creating a community, a sense of belonging, knowing, caring, meeting, etc., a community. And this is a picture at the Roundabout, and we use this picture to say that it's about, we think that this looks a little bit like a forest, but it's a roundabout, no? So it's more about how does this roundabout nature-based design actually feels and function. And here you have a map of, and it's a little bit opposite. The water actually goes upwards, up north. That's against, common, but that's the graduation of this site. And the idea is, I mean, for 100 years we've been making the section of infrastructure convex in order to get the water away, whereas this is basically to do it concave in order to put in nature and create a more, and include both the blue and the green and also the people infrastructure into this. And this was the roundabout before, and this is how it looked half a year after we planted. And here you have, I think, to some extent we use this project to say, because the capacity of the infrastructure, the amount of parking spaces is still the same, even down to, turning curves, how big a car can actually turn in the roundabout. So we use this to say that there is room for nature in cities. If we can make it like this, then we can definitely. And we planted around 600 trees. And already our biologists, they can't help monitoring our own, so they go into fieldwork, and already 100 new species of fauna has found habitat in a roundabout and a normal housing street. And it's become a spot, an Instagram spot, which we love to follow, because we actually also find how people interact and use the space, how they use it as part of their everyday life, and not only as a transit. And here you have a drawing from before and after, and this is a drone shot from last summer. And then I have a small video that actually has a sound, and if I click, whoa, it works. Push. I have a small water problem up here. If anyone has a tissue, that would be wonderful. About the roundabout, there is, When we won the competition, the idea was that it shouldn't be salted. So that means a specific type of nature allowance. But then during the design phases, the city of Copenhagen decided, well, you need to salt it anyway. So we had to change the whole system of water and irrigation. So right now it's a very low, it's a very banal way of doing it, but we have a certain dwell that has a winter situation and a summer situation. So that was just what I tried to tell you from while you saw the movie, but thank you very much. So the last quick 3 projects. No, I have a little time yet. No rush. We just incubated this courtyard in Copenhagen 6 weeks ago. So what you see here is the mayor for technique and urban space. I don't know how to say it in German. Anyways, it is part also of the same strategy for the city of Copenhagen as St. Kjelds and Bryggervangen was. So how do we include rainwater management and nature in general into our urban realm and still create spaces for people to enjoy and create a community and a sense of belonging, a sense of home. And in 2018, there was a big research project conducted by Aarhus University. It was released. The research was done on 1 million children living in Europe, and it was conducted. It was done by satellite photos, so how we move around from given birth to the age of 18. And one of the conclusions from this research was that children actually growing up with an everyday contact with nature minimizes the risk of the 17 largest mental diseases by 50%. So we need to give this to our children. We also need to give nature to ourselves in the city, and nature that is actually responding to our whereabouts, how we behave, but also gives us aspire our senses and so forward. So that's also part of it. There's a lot of children living in this specific house. And here you have a site. The site is, I'll see if I can point now. Yeah, the site is this triangular. And the courtyard is actually these 2 triangles. Right here there's a private school. And the courtyard belongs to this long stretch of houses. It's a very noisy. You see the Ringstrasse around the city of Copenhagen. So it's a very it's a long. So it's a very noise. The traffic is very noisy and also polluting at this area. So the general idea was to create these stamped earth walls. It's not concrete, but it's stamped. It's a stamped earth wall, you could say. That's what it is. I'll show you the images. And create a new set of urban spaces, a new series of bigger trees. There was some existing trees. It was actually done by C.T. H. Sørensen, which is a very famous Danish landscape architect. And then simulating what does it mean on a 100-year rain event when water really sort of, how do we retain it and store it, and that would change the whole atmosphere of the area. And this is looking down from one of the apartments, the view. It's a house for storage and for garbage. And we reused a lot of pavement from the city of Copenhagen. They have this storage where you can go and see, is there anything we can use in this? And it was actually from this, you could say, the state hospital renovation. And then we also reused, I mean, this is like the first house SLA has ever done. And I'm not sure we're doing, it's an orangerie. Do you know what that means? It's a common house. And that's reuse of the windows that they changed in the housing block, creating this nice spot. And here you see the wall, but you also see the house in like the background. To another project in Tingbjerg, that's a social housing area, 10 kilometers from the town hall of Copenhagen, so not far away. Here we won the urban plan in order to densify and make another series of housing proposals, both privately owned but also semi-privately owned, in this area. The story goes like this, that it was C.T.H. Sørensen, who was actually the landscape architect who was hired to do this housing area. And then he said, well, I'm not doing the houses, so I'll call my best friend, Sten Ejler Rasmussen. I don't know if you know him, but he's like a famous Danish architect from the 50s, 60s, and 70s. So he did these houses. And the idea here is to densify. There's a lot of space, but there's also, it's surrounded by magnificent nature that is not part of how you actually have the urban space inside the housing area. So it's kind of, also this island in the middle of this nice nature of Copenhagen, surrounding Copenhagen. And I know this is a little blurred, but if you, as an architect, look into an area like this, it's almost like a glossy image. Well, you can only do it like in these tiles because you cannot touch this fantastic cultural heritage that we have here. But if you look at the newspapers, it's a different set of stories that comes forward. And that's what the outside actually hear and listen and reads about these areas. But if you are a resident, it's a whole different way of looking into the everyday life. So the idea here was to add townhouses, new housing blocks, new types of houses into the area, and then connect the surrounding nature and the access to the surrounding nature, but also have like a spill-in effect from these nature values into this center. And this is a picture of the first 8 townhouses. When they were, the general idea is here that we should build 1,500 new houses in this area. The first 8 houses, when they were kind of, open for who wants to buy, who wants to live here, they had 1,300 applicants over 2 weeks. So there was definitely a demand and a wish and a need. And this is a private owned house in an area like this. Then it was down to that you had to make a specific, why do I, as a person or a family, want to live here? And then they had like 380 applicants, and there was only 8 houses, no? And one of them is still like a showroom, so it was basically 7 houses. But the idea here is that it's low cost, it's below market value. But if you as a house owner sell in the first 5 years that you live there, you need to give half of the revenue to the existing housing union. So there's a whole new set of regulation in order to create a more diverse neighborhood, a more safe neighborhood, and to sort of open up this area. So I'll just run you through some pictures that we've done to see how they live and how. And in between these 2 blocks of 4 houses, there's actually small allotments for the existing residents that they can go and use and rent for 1 to 3 years and to grow in this. And that's also a way of almost like, nudging people to meet, so it's not us and them, and so forward. A view from the inside of one of the houses. And then last, not least, this is a big area between the airport and the city of Copenhagen called Ørestad. And it's just to tell you that we also do maintenance design. And it does cost money to maintain a lawn. But it's also almost like a green desert, no? It's a monoculture, so what we did here for the Housing Union, we said, well, okay, how much does it cost to maintain this grass lawn per year? And that was a specific number. Okay, what if we stretch this amount to 5 years, and then after 5 years, then the cost is lowered? And they said, okay, we can finance that. And then we did like a whole new types of spaces, and basically planted different type of species in order for creating something that is nice to look at, nice to explore, but also that creates life, place for life, both regarding biodiversity and flora and fauna. Yes, that's it.
Thanks a lot, Mette, for this brilliant lecture and for these very nice projects and examples. I think it gives us a lot of food for thought that Lilli can also react to and connect it to the Viennese context. And I think you can really see how the image of nature and of nature-based spaces has changed dramatically, the aesthetics of it, but of course also more important, the biodiversity. But let me briefly just introduce Lilli Licka. She is professor and head of the Department of Landscape Architecture at the BOKU, the University of Natural Resources and Applied Life Sciences in Vienna. She was head of Licka until 2016 and started LLL Landscape Architecture in 2017. And as I said before, she's also a great policymaker and networker and also activist. She has founded different platforms like Nextland, and she's also co-founder of an interventionist collective, the blah blah blah, which is always doing really nice performances, interventions. And of course, she's a landscape designer and researcher. Lilli, I would give you the first opportunity to start this conversation or to react to Mette.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to Lene and to you and also to the IBA, for organizing this very interesting lecture with Mette. Thank you for your inspiring talk. I would like to touch 3 topics, more or less. And let me just dive into it, if that's okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. One is, if you compare the situation here to what you have shown, I mean that you're not the only designer, and there might be others as well who work differently, but still one of the huge differences I see is that you work with a process, which is very rare here because it's very hard to sell a process and not a product. And even the projects which claim to deal with processes, succession and also perhaps social developments are very hard to put on the ground. I mean, they might be able to, we might be able to sell the idea, but then even to realize it, it's very hard because it takes time also for the commissioners. So how do you argue for that, or is it something which you have to argue for, or is it a given that you can do it?
No, it's definitely something that we have to argue for. Well, it differs a little bit if you have to onboard the people that you are collaborating with. So in the relation between end users and client and experts internally, but also externally, it's very important that you start the process by creating trust, and then being aware of that. I mean, if we just win a competition and we make these nice renders, and then the mayor in the end and the end users can stand at that specific point, at that specific time of year, looking at the render, looking at the site and the realized project, and it's the same, then it's a failure. So it's also a way of arguing that if you the project of Gellerup, this urban park, it took 5 years to realize, 4.5 years to realize. So if you don't learn and do the design in a process, then I guess it's a bit of a failure, no? But you need to invest in that understanding from a start.
Well, it's always about the process because we work with nature, but there's still a difference between something which you deliver and then it grows into something else, or something which you have shown which needs development in order to fulfill the requirements of the project itself.
But in general we say we do 40% urban planning, and urban planning is a process. That's never a product or a specific design. So, and when you work with living matter, it is from the day you hand it over to the client, it's starting to grow. So that's actually where the life and the process starts.
I think
maybe I don't understand your question right.
No, I do. I think you do.
Okay, good.
It's just interesting that you are if you sell a maintenance scheme, for instance.
Yeah, we do.
That's obvious that you need time for it to show a result.
Yeah.
But then how do you? But it might be difficult to argue for the money to be expanded, to extend the budget for more than 2 years.
Yeah.
So, because it's not regulated. It's much more difficult to. Yeah. That's what we would be confronted with. That's why I'm so curious about it.
True.
Yeah,
but
so
it does. This is in Ørsted, the project about the maintenance budget that we then stretched over 5 years. That's a local ownership union. If it was the city of Copenhagen that has all these maintenance paradigms of how to maintain, then you need to take them in their hand and go to the specific site and say, well, you maintain it too hard. Mm-hmm. Because you cannot do it you cannot maintain St. Kjelds and Bryggervangen as a normal urban space in Copenhagen. And then you need to tease their, curiosity on that. And it hasn't been easy, but it's like starting a movement or like changing the direction of a super tanker. You have to do it like step by step, and finding people inside the organization that are willing to do something a little bit different, and then taking.
So it's some kind of
inviting them on board. Yeah.
Some kind of an educational process as well.
But it is for us as well.
Which you have also gone through. Which brings me to another topic, the second topic of 3, which is the shift of your design approach within SLA. I think that's an interesting issue because, as far as I'm familiar with your projects, and SLA has been a very famous firm for a long time. That's why we have come across some of your some of the early projects as well, and they were much more about urban design, I would say, than about what you have shown us today, about the nature-based design, as you call it, which I think is a really good term. So could you perhaps describe how, on the one hand, you shifted from a design focus to the nature focus a bit, perhaps, and on the other hand, also from perhaps, also how you integrate your design intentions into the nature now? Because we have seen quite some interesting design as well, which you could have described if it had been a different focus, of course. So perhaps you could talk about that shift a little bit.
Yes, well, the shift. I've been with SLA since 2011, and there's always been an atmosphere of wanting to learn new disciplines, to learn something different, to do something different than we did yesterday. And we still have that ambition and that kind of atmosphere at the studio. So it's also because we care about, we truly believe that nature has such a wide span of value proposition. So not only a nice space, or a space that takes care of the rainwater and makes this space more resilient, but also that actually creates a safer environment, a new type of, you could say, meeting spots. And in order for us to actually include that into the design, so it's not something that, oh wow, now it's safer. That it's actually, and also when you work in Gellerup, I mean, the residents are the client. So how do you include them into the design? I mean, we cannot do that as architects. I'm trained as an architect. I'm not trained to do that. So that's why we have anthropologists, because not only to facilitate a process like that with like the cities, the residents' democracy, but also to translate what the residents are demanding into a design. So does that make sense?
Yeah.
So and in general, it's if you talk about aesthetics in a philosophical way, then it's historically related to the elite, thinking this is good or bad because I have more knowledge than you have, so I define what is good, what is nice to look at. So that's kind of the philosophical way of looking at aesthetics. The way we regard aesthetics is more on a scientific base, where the aesthetics of nature aspires all our senses as a person, as people has. We have a lot of senses. So not only our visual, but also how we feel and how we care and how we navigate. Yeah.
And a lot of your projects seem to be some kind of a repair strategy of something which is either decaying or is old or needs some refreshment or improvement. And my question then would be: is your approach to introduce natural features into that repair thought? Is that something which you bring into the project, or is it something which is asked by the client? I mean, do they look for, is the brief, we need someone who designs a nature-based new courtyard for that social housing estate?
Differs a lot, Lilli. And I mean, that differs a lot. And sometimes it's about, St. Kjelds and Bryggerbanken, this housing street and the roundabout, the idea was there to create more biodiversity in the city. That was part of the brief. So it was one of the parameters. And in order for us to put that into a design and be specific about it, and also to gain data, to actually be, hardcore, what is happening here? Then we need to have that profession in-house.
Yeah.
And it's also much more fun to work interdisciplinary because it's, and in general, architecture always have been interdisciplinary. We work with engineers, we work with cities, we work with, it is an interdisciplinary discipline from the start.
But how did you open up to all these other disciplines? Because of course, interdisciplinary has been around for quite some time, but the type of disciplines which were involved, they differ from every decade, perhaps.
True.
So how did you? Because you said you have an anthropologist and people you wouldn't think of in the first place. So how do you add on new disciplines? Is it the need of a project, or is it your own ambition in one of your retreats with the circle, where you think, oh, perhaps we should work together with someone from, I don't know?
It's an investment. We've done, 3 years ago, I couldn't, get the client to pay for our biologist. But I was like, we were striving to make it break even at least. So kind of, that's business oriented, and I guess you all know about that it's not me paying, me or my partners paying the salary, it's the clients, no? So it has been an investment. But if you have such a purpose, and you have a studio as SLA where you cannot only say a purpose, you need to follow up on it and show the data. Yeah.
Well, that's a crucial topic, I would say, because you have to be able to afford that as well.
Yeah.
In order.
Yeah, but also how do you include it into the design and that it's so like the starting conditions are right for the purpose to be realized, to create biodiversity, to put ecosystem services into. On a city scale, that means about that. The biologists, they have a whole different way of working, both desktop analysis, but also, and putting that into a design is valuable because that's. But it takes time, and we need to invest in it.
But also the phases in which you need these expertises are very different, and that's something which makes it difficult, at least here, I guess, that because in order to know all about soil and about the habitats which are there, you need a lot of inventory in the beginning, perhaps even 2 years or at least one whole year to have all the life circles and seasons of a year. So that's a lot of time which you sometimes, it's hard to have it, and then also of course to pay, but. Also, the system of planning is something which has to change or adapt to that as well. Yeah. Is that what you experienced?
Yes, and we definitely experienced that the demand for our expertise is increasing.
And which expertise? The one
blue, green, connection, the whole way of looking into the city system. The whole way of making them more resilient, of adding nature on buildings, beside buildings, of getting that whole series of values into cities. That's definitely a demand.
And then one thing which is really interesting for me is how you cross scales. Yeah. Is it, if you say you work on a master plan level, strategic master plan for livable cities? That's what I wrote down. Yeah. So the master plan level is a completely different scale. Is it something where you would also go down into the detail in the same place, or is it different places where you work?
That differs a lot. Every time I kind of look into a year's sum of project, I try to sort of put them into different categories, but it definitely differs a lot. It can go from, we did for a private client a project in Milan, and that was definitely not part of the strategy to expand our market into Milan. So then I was like, okay, but we never talked about working in Italy. And then I was just like, we cannot help doing this. I mean, we have to do it. They are trying to do this innovation district where they want us to clean the water in the canal system by nature, and we have experience on that since 2001. We've done these type of projects where you actually add in species that cleans. Yeah, you know what I mean. Anyways, so to be a little bit direct. I mean, if the clients doesn't want our purpose, then we don't have a project. So we have to sort of. It's not. I'm not saying do you like our purpose. Otherwise, of course, you start the conversation differently, but that's how we operate. That's how we. I mean, that's also to keep the level of keeping evolving, but also keeping the ambition, and that people are thriving. I mean, that's what definitely motivates them, is to do like a difference, but to do projects that differs.
Yeah.
Well, kind of the core of the project, if it's a big master plan, or if it's like the harbor of Oslo, or if it's a roundabout and a housing street in Copenhagen.
And what's your experience about the commissioner, from public services? Is it because what we experience here is that we have quite a lot of different departments dealing with different topics. So the environmental department, for instance, is something completely different than the planning department, and then housing is different, and so they have different goals and ambitions. And for a project like that, the very positive thing would have to happen that they work together as well as commissioners. So do you bring them together, or don't you have to do that because they work together anyway?
We have to bring them together.
Ah, good. How do you do that?
Yeah, that's definitely a challenge. You start by asking questions.
Okay.
But there's a funny story to this. We were invited to New York after the superstorm Sandy, that definitely hit Manhattan and whole of New York State very violently, and then they were looking for solutions to make the city more resilient, and then we were like, I think 5 architecture studios and 5 engineer companies invited over, and we had all this bag of this is what we've done and we're the best at, and so forward. And then we came into this space, and then there was like, and it's definitely a larger city and more projects and so forward. And then there was like the person in charge of the social housing. There was the person in charge of parks and recreation, for infrastructure, for collective traffic, infrastructure and roads and maintenance. And they said, well, and then the climate adaptation in charge of that. And then they started the whole meeting by saying, well, just to let you know, we have never been in the same room on this side of the table before. So then I was just like, okay, I have to completely redo my presentation, because it's all about collaboration. So you're definitely addressing, and when you are in a smaller country, I mean, that's, yeah. So the utilities, I mean, the pipes underneath doesn't know what happens. I mean, it's, yeah. So that was a life-changing experience for us to maybe not take for granted that in Copenhagen you can actually open the doors, and you meet because it's smaller.
Yes, and then you would also try or decide for yourselves at least who should be part of the whole game, or
Yeah.
and also in terms of the citizens or the dwellers, or on the other side of what you call clients before in your project. Are you integrating them into are you inviting them, or is there a law saying that you have to participate? You have to set up a process of participation for a social housing project or a urban development project or whatever?
No, it's not regulated. It's a free market.
And you are doing the whole process as well?
What kind of process?
The process for integrating, like for instance in Kellogg, the young people who want to play football and...
No, in Kellogg you have like a social housing, you have like a social entity that takes care of information and I don't know how you do it here in Vienna, but that's how it is in Denmark. So then you collaborate with that person. So that's where our anthropologists are kind of connecting to them and understanding. So our anthropologist is kind of facilitating the gap between, or the conversation between content and democracy. Mm-hmm. But we're also starting these projects by saying, well, we are experts, and we have done this several times, and it maybe sounds a little bit arrogant, but we are experts in designing spaces, and you as residents or end users are experts in your daily lives as they are today. And together we must find a way for actually making a flexible space, but also an intervention that moves us further. So that's a way of, starting, saying, well, if you just want to wish, then you have like 6 sets of table tennis tops and barbecues and dog toilets. I mean that's the whole budget. So you need to be quite specific in saying, well, we are the experts on this part, and you are the expert on that part, and together we have to find common ground. We did a road in Sønder Boulevard for the city of Copenhagen, and that was how we started that project, and then we said, well, later on you will find there will be space for tabletop tennis, there will be space for barbecues, but that's not part of what we are doing right now. But we'll make flexible space for that in order for your life to sort of evolve, but also your needs and your life in general.
Should the public
I think
be
we should
involved?
open it up to the floor. Yeah, very good idea. Thanks. Any questions from your side? Hast du aufgezeigt, Kurt? No? Entschuldigung. Das war...
That's Thomas. Thomas and I had a almost Sachertorte today. Yeah. But it was with some kind of berry instead. Berries.
Now it's working. Maybe I'm playing the icebreaker. Thanks, Mette, that you already said that we met each other today. Yes. I'm trying now to play a bit the icebreaker because it was very an inspiring presentation of your side, and especially to give a little bit landscape architecture hope, to see it a little bit more broad, because of course we now here in Austria, and I have to admit I'm a part of the Austrian Association of Landscape Architecture called ÖGLA, just making a short advertisement. We need the youth and youth students to know, to make more pressure for landscape architecture, because I would say I had the pleasure to study in Denmark, and to being back in Austria was at one point a little bit frustrating, but now it's coming the good point. I wanted to ask you back to the office, because you're so broad, from the landscape architect to the anthropologist, what I love to hear, but as well the architects and so many technical colleagues. How was it possible to argue with your client, or to argue financially, that you were able to have 3 offices being so broad, and to say, yeah, we bring a surplus into your project, not just planning something on the green space or trying to solve something, but we add something on it, because those processes or those projects are sustainable in a different setup. Even maybe it's financially, as we heard, by the maintaining, is it sustainable by the social terms because it cures maybe some issues, but how was it possible to do this? Because what I face here in Austria, I would argue, you being happy as an office to get a client, to win a competition, and then they're just landscape architects because you try to finance yourself and survive basically, and not thinking over the box because you have no money left in the end. Maybe too broad, and maybe it's feeling a little bit to Lilli's question, but I'd like to raise up once again, because I think landscape architecture is something for the future, but we need as well some colleagues who are working with us.
Adding to that, maybe could it be that the climate urgency we are facing is also like an entry ticket or a trigger for your profession?
Definitely.
I think it's changing. Huh?
I think you're so right. And I mean, we didn't arrange the extreme rainwater event in Copenhagen. So the kind of, you could say the benefit and the reason is not only ours, it's also, a demand. But as a business that has grown into 3 studios, I think that's also because we are daring to do it and daring to push the agenda a little bit. And then including when I started at SLA, we did a lot more projects that was like sub-consultants to building architects. That is a very, very small part of what we are doing today. And if we do it, we demand that there's a split between the sum of money for the urban space, so what happens outside the building. There's a safe gate between house, indoor, what's outdoor. Because otherwise, so I don't know how it is in Germany,
how
but
you describe it.
yeah, yeah, because that was not like the start. When we started like 10 or 12 years ago, it wasn't like that. So maybe you had like a sum for a project, a house and a park, and then this was like 95%. The park was like 5% of the total sum, and then this, always becomes a little bit more expensive. And then it takes, okay, there's no space for there's no money for the trees, there's no money for basically we just have a lawn or something like that. And we very soon argued that we as a company, we cannot work like that, because then we do very poor projects. And then we sort of started to shift that. And we did that by pushing politicians, but also the people doing the regulation plans, saying you need to have this division. And then there was also, climate adaptation in cities, and in general a need for more green, and the change in paradigm from looking as nature outside instead of having it, in the city as part of the urban fabric. So it's a little bit a hard question to answer, but in 2011 to 2016, we did the International Criminal Court in Hague, and that was done in a Natura 2000 preserved area. And in order for us to design a security regulated, almost like a rampart, but not something that is like Fort Knox. So how do you keep like open air in and light and in a Natura 2000? How do you work with that? Then we need to have like more disciplines on board. Architects and designers cannot only solve that. And in order to get them actually into the studio, then you can both get influenced by that profession, but you can also influence that profession. So our biologists, they they have found SLA, you could say, more or less. And now we are more like known for having biologists. So now biologists are also, we also look for more biologists, but the first ones, and that also goes with the anthropologists that we started with, they actually found us because of our purpose. So, does that make, is that an answer?
My question was as well more a comment than a question.
Yeah.
Maybe to make it even more complicated or almost a little bit philosophical, like I really liked about the way you talked about the situation in Gellerup, the demography, like a lot of young people, a lot of unemployed, and you didn't describe it as a problem but as a potential, like a lot of people who can use these spaces and who can take care of these spaces and can kind of shape them in their specific way. And so this means like always really looking at things first, looking at the given and also working with the given, especially concerning the social fabric. But of course on the other side, like you're talking about nature-based design, but there's a lot of terraforming involved, so a lot of big machines and a lot of like doing it new from the scratch. So to what extent would it also be possible, like also concerning the given nature, the given kind of wilderness or strange hybrid situations you have in the urban realm, to work with that instead of doing this complete terraforming, which seems to be there in most of the projects?
So the question was how to work with the existing city nature, for example, and enhance that? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's, I mean, one example is when we planted these 600 trees in St. Kjeldsbryggervangen, then the acidity level of the soil for planting the whole understory was too high. So we needed to sort of understand how can we lower that in order for doing the planting. And then we went to our to forestry. We also have a forest candidate in the studio, understanding about how do you maintain forests. Isn't it called forest candidate? Yeah. Okay. And he said, well, you should just order a trunk of cone shells and shovel it into the soil, and then it will take like a couple of weeks, and then the acidic level is right. And we were just like, okay, that's a cheap solution. Let's try it. And we convinced the city of Copenhagen to test it. And that's what we did. So that's another example of having these different disciplines in the studio actually makes the design, but also what we do better.
Well, you could also work with other offices, you know, with somebody from outside. I mean, you could also team up with different disciplines outside of your office.
But we do that.
Yeah.
I mean, a third of what we do is outside the Nordic countries. So it's in England, London, Manchester, Canada, Abu Dhabi. That's basically it at the moment. We tried a lot in Paris, but that was, and we still have some small projects, but that's super hard. It's so bureaucratic. I hope there's no French here, but that was really like a long term. But we are still.
No, but I mean that could be an answer to your question. You could also team up, with somebody else. You don't have to have them in the beginning. You don't have to have them in your own office necessarily.
No, but it makes a better design.
Well, it's much more integrated, of course. But if
it makes a better design. The value it's not much more integrated, but it makes a better design, and that's also why we have technical person inside. It's because sometimes we can actually postpone the engineer to the detail phases, because we have, I mean, there is. It's like driving a car, you know. If you only, you need to have a driver, you need to have a co-driver, you need to have an orientation, you need to somebody. I mean, it's like being a collective team and where you cooperate, and
Yeah, it's
a lot harder if you have it like silos. It's a bit like you talked about the municipality and the cities. If you have like the silos, if you have it like in-house, then you can get inspired and you can get it into the initial phases of a project.
yeah, well, I think
And it makes the project stronger. It makes the opportunity for pushing the technical part of the design at an early stage. If you don't have it, it's like, okay, can you please fix the drains of this nice drawing of terrain that I've done? If you don't have it in-house, you don't have the right plant design that responds to the specific climate or to that specific soil, or filters the noise, or make a noise-canceling sound of grasses, so you can actually be outside in a noisy neighborhood, as the Courtyard I showed. So, what I meant about working outside the Nordic countries is that we always collaborate with local architects, landscape architects, engineers. We always do that. But if you have more expertises inside, then design is not only design, but you actually get the full value proposition out of the design, instead of adding it in.
Yeah, I was just trying to give some hope to these people here.
Yeah,
I have a question from quite in the beginning about your planting schemes, because you said that you were talking about city nature. Is it city nature?
Yeah, we call it city nature.
Yeah, city nature. So it's not the natural. That's also some kind, some response perhaps to Angelica's question, whether you work with the existing nature or you create new nature in a way. Yeah. And I mean, there is this landscape laboratory. I'm sure you're familiar with in, I think, Aarhus. Is it?
Aarhus? Outside Aarhus, yeah.
Aarhus, yeah. And they have. I was quite impressed by their experiments, combining different species, which are decorative species, like, I don't know, pine trees with magnolias, which you would never put together.
Yeah.
But they had teams of ecologists and designers, and they were trying to find out whether this forbidden combination in terms of ecology would nevertheless work, and how it could work aesthetically but also ecologically. And you were talking about tropical species, and as far as I know, Copenhagen is not a tropical country. So does that refer to some kind of an experiment like that? Or
I didn't say tropical species, I said exotic species.
Oh, exotic.
But I mean, all private gardens has exotic species. I don't know about Austria, but
we don't.
So, I mean, it's a way of and there's a big difference between exotic species and invasive species. So we are introducing it. We mainly work with indigenous or native species, but we are introducing it where it's contributing to the biotope, but also where the microclimate allows it. I mean, I've been to many private gardens where you even had like peaches and apricots growing and bringing fruits. I mean, so it's a way of so that's why we do it.
But is it? I mean, I had the impression that you use it also to give a lush expression to the place.
Yeah.
Because of course, if you only stick to the local species, it might be completely different. And also, it's very familiar to everyone. So if you have a wow effect, if you want to produce a wow effect, then that might help. So that was my question.
So how do you see that, Lilli, using indigenous or exotic plants or combining them?
Well, I see it the same way. I see it the same way, yes, definitely. Because it's also, I mean, there are, of course, restrictions when it comes to, like, neophytes and kind of dangerous species, but for the rest, I mean, now it's changing anyway because of climate shifts in
Definitely.
temperature, and we have to adapt our planting schemes to a large extent. I'm sure you do too.
Yeah, and it's what's exciting about doing projects outside the Nordic countries is that to some extent, at least if you go to a site like the UAE, the Abu Dhabi, it's kind of that they have forgotten their native species. And it's part of our cultural heritage. It's part of our legacy as humans, no? It's part of, what we are embedded in. So sometimes it's almost, I can say it in a space like this, I guess, but it's almost easy in order to say, you have all these native species. Don't you want to sort of use that? We know that it can grow. We know that the gaff tree can, and the acacia is super good here. It even creates nests for birds and attracts that into the city. So, but sometimes it needs somebody from the outside in order to put that into and that's sometimes, at least internally at SLA, this is a part of why we go beyond Denmark, is because that we can deliver a certain value, but we also gain a lot of knowledge that we can put back into in our local environment. And I think from you asked before, Lilli, and I think regarding all what, plants and trees, I think you are much more experienced than I am. I'm not so knowledgeable about the specific, about these trees. And sometimes, you're from SLA, can you tell me what type of tree this is? And I'm just like, just a minute, I'll find my app. And can you tell me if it's good? Is it doing good? No, I cannot. It looks like it's doing okay. So just to get that on.
But that's why you team up.
That's why we team up. Exactly.
It's okay.
Exactly. But the change in what we do and how we operate and where we operate comes from the first 15 years of realizing urban spaces. So I think to some extent that also makes us more like trustworthy, that we don't show images, but we show that we have actually done it. And that's also, what gets us up in the morning, that you can actually visit and see if it thrives, and it kills us if there's a tree that doesn't thrive.
But what was really striking for me was concerning like Skjold, the project, the more recent projects like the Roundabout and let's say the backyard, like the long backyard. If you look at the drone images, I think they're completely boring because they don't have this image of landscaping, but if you really see the images of people like being in there, experiencing, being on the ground, I think that's the only interesting perspective. So it's the usage. It's not the image from a bird's view, and I think this is really also a change in landscaping. Sure. That's happening.
I found the Roundabout really exciting.
I found it very exciting, but not from a bird's view. Did you?
Well, I found the fact very exciting how much space you can, spare for a park rather than a transport surface.
It's 2/3 of the asphalt that is removed. And Vienna is quite paved.
Yes.
I've been here today. I've been here as a student, but there could be spaces for more of that, even though you have fantastic parks.
Well, as you are so in a really innovative practice, I wonder, that's a personal interest of mine. Have you ever, or do you also introduce projects which you think are necessary, or do you work in competitions, or are you asked by clients only, or do you also develop something which perhaps you think is necessary on that spot?
We I mean, it's hard to realize a project that is not, but we do a lot of investment in knowledge evolvement, and we do invest in kind of an alternative to how Copenhagen should develop. Copenhagen is famous for a finger plan with the green, so we had like we did a whole several months of work where we said, okay, can we do it differently? Can we, because the green in between the fingers of Copenhagen is actually not so green. So how do you actually make a more resilient city in general on a large scale strategic plan? So these type of projects we do. And then you saw the matrix. We also try to sort of collect and share. For example, we have like a paper saying about how should learning environment be for school children. Could you include a different way of making schoolyards than just having them paved, or a different way of learning math, a different way of connecting, something like that.
So that's
we have like
between research and
and then we also do some. We have like a European, what is it called? European Union, EU funded project together with a sociological university in Portugal. That is about green and blue infrastructure in the social housing area. So that's a research project, and we are doing different types of research in our R&D. We are doing that. Yeah. And
because there's so many young people here, do you take interns?
We do take interns, definitely. Yeah.
Okay. So there's a question.
Yeah.
Please.
Thank you. Well, thanks for sharing the information and all your experience. It was very exciting. So what I wanted to ask, and please correct me if that's wrong, SLA is defined that you are challenging yourself, making bold decisions by tackling problems with a new way. And how do you cope with doing these bold decisions? Because we are working also in a landscape office, and our daily business is that we have to deliver a design that works, and it needs to work with every condition that is supported by governance or by the social housing, and sometimes they don't really have money. So our planting design needs to work in first instance, and then it should look nice as well. But so as an expert, you are forced to say that this works 100%. It doesn't, like, there is a heat, but the plant will still cope with it. So, but if you try now a new way and a new approach, then you have this uncertainty that it would work because nobody ever tried. So how do you deal with it? Is it that you have so many experts within different fields and that you work together and you collaborate? And also, was that a change within SLA so that you can now look back to the time when you had not so many experts within this entrepreneurial field, that now you can feel or you can see it within the projects, this change, that with these new challenges you are less afraid than you would have been 10 years before when you were just architects in your office?
So the question was, could you maybe that how do we dare to do it differently than we did it yesterday?
Exactly, yeah.
How to dare the experiment.
Dare the experiment. Well, you have to have the client on board of that too. Otherwise, I mean, you have to sort of have like a common ground. So we don't just do it as SLA. I mean, that's not how we operate. We need to have the client, safeguarded, and also the the city, the maintenance people. You need to have that. And sometimes we do, in St. Kjeldsenbryggen, we actually did a pilot. We did like a small test together with the residents and together with the city of Copenhagen to sort of make sure that it was robust, the planting design and the plant species that we introduced. But in general, nature, it's not so complex.
But I guess that's another thing, that also the maintenance departments, the gardeners from the municipality, that their education, their training also has to change, or they need a new knowledge because the way of gardening is changing rapidly. Yeah. But
was that an answer to your question? Maybe not. But just to get it clear, I mean, we cannot, as a design studio, even though we are interdisciplinary, but we still have like the main chunk of people is designers and city planners and architects. We cannot just, I mean, we need to have like a Respondenz. We cannot just do it without like, a collective, okay, this is what we do.
Hi. Well, thank you very much for your ideas, sharing your ideas. And earlier you said you always start with building trust, and but then how do you build trust on a very practical level with communities, especially the people who live there, who might not know what you're doing, or who might are intimidated by, I don't know, big famous architecture office coming in, redesigning their existing context. How do you build trust? Do you have a specific scheme of how to break down this barrier?
No, we don't have one solution to that question. Gellerup, for example, I mean, we pushed forward this soccer field with artificial grass and a stand and a light and so forth. And just before we were putting the artificial grass on top, the gravel, everything was completely in level, so it was like zzz. Some of the young boys took their motorbikes, the scooters, and drove into this gravel and made these super nice traces. And then the social housing union went straight to them and said, this is a really bad idea because we're doing this for you. And that is kind of outside of, we were not part of that, we were just part of doing the detailed design. But that gave us food for thought in order to engage them into the process. Because since then there has been no harassment whatsoever at that in that park. Do you understand what I mean? So we don't have, but what I'm trying to say is that the projects that we do, there need to be like a common interest in making more nature in a project. Otherwise it would be somebody else, another design studio that they would need to engage. And if you start on that common ground, then there's like building up trust by showing we could do it like this, by making them part of the decision. Even if you have like the team of companies doing that, from an engineer company to like a facility management, I mean, then there's always, if you make these teams and you invest in the dialogue and in the relation and in the starting of a project, then trust somehow comes along most of the times.
I think there was a question over there somewhere.
even two of them, I think, one in the middle and one in the rear road.
I actually wanted to come back to kind of the plant species. I was, during COVID, I think I was one of the few people that actually stopped buying house plants, because I realized how unsustainable the houseplant nurseries are, and it was sort of in the same time. And you said you cooperate a lot with tree nurseries, and I wanted to ask you about your approach to this cooperation, and whether, because bringing the nature to the city shouldn't mean that we're taking this nature away from somewhere else. And for example, with houseplants, it's completely unsustainable because it uses this super fertile soil, etc. So we actually shouldn't really be doing it on such a big scale. But anyways, I wanted to ask whether maybe in Denmark it's a bit different with nurseries, and whether your approach in this cooperation changed there.
Well, the reason we collaborate with nurseries is because we always go out and select the trees. Not always, but most of the time. Let's say 80. For the urban spaces we do in the Nordic countries, we always go with like the sum of money and buy the trees and the plants. That's not common in Denmark, but that's something where we can get more value on the trees and on the plants for money. Because we have the specialist who knows that let's try to do that specific tree, and let's test the ones that you have on unsellable, because they look different. So they are not completely like like a typical road tree. And if you just like order trees and plants by sending an order, then you get like one type of plants and trees. But if you actually engage and gain knowledge on how you make a more longevity part of select a tree that maybe is a little bit odd, but maybe is more sturdy and more robust in an urban environment. So that's why we have the collaboration, and it's not only in Denmark, it's in all over Europe that we have plant nurseries that we buy plants for our clients. So that's where the interest sort of starts, is that we are kind of known for selecting trees that is a little bit different. Also species of trees.
Are you trying to somehow influence also the system of how plants are being grown in the nurseries? Or
no, not yet.
Because when you're bringing trees
2 years,
of 30 years old tree, then it must have been growing somewhere else, and it required. I just wanted to ask whether you're also integrating that as part of it.
I think it's a very interesting question for the future of landscape architecture. Definitely. Also a little bit connecting to what I said about terraforming and versus working with the given, like to see it really as a network of relations and continuous web where everything is interconnected, and if taking it from there and putting it there, you're wounding something. Whatever you do, you're also destroying something. I think we know this for architecture, for building, that it's really invasive and it's destroying a lot of territory and nature, but of course also landscape architecture can have a problem in that way.
Sorry, the next step would be to have an own nursery, no? Because if you have an own nursery, you don't have to transport. That's also something.
I think we could make maybe a last round of questions and then we have to wrap it up. Oh, now, finally, it's the final call. I think that one was waiting for some time.
Hello. Okay. Yeah. Thank you for your presentation. First, I wanted to come back to the, or not wanted, to the social aspect, to know about if we have different zones, also social zones, social controlling zones in spaces. If you incorporate or dealing and also planning them, how do you deal also with security and lighting, and also if you incorporate some hidden corners where it's really dark or where you really can rest out, or if some social groups can step back and have not this normal efficient working daily life day or whatever. Yeah, if you deal or if you include this as a social issue. Yeah, maybe,
also. Yeah, maybe I would like to take the second question also from here to speed it up a little bit, because I think we are getting quite late. There was this guy here, and then maybe...
Thank you, Mette. My question is quite short. You said the Roundabout project was kind of a pilot project, and do you think it's becoming a role model also outside of the climate district? And if so, is this push or demand coming from the city or also from the residents who wants to transform their space outside of the building?
Well, that's an easy one to answer. Of course, I mean, the way of working with this roundabout and this housing street is applicable in other roundabouts and other streets, but it needs to make sense in order for the hydrological circuit and the capacity of rainwater. So it sort of depends on, you know, the blue and green infrastructure of a neighborhood or of an area, and then again it depends on what is at stake, what type of growth medium, what type of soil, and what type of issues are we dealing with. But the city of Copenhagen is looking into making some kind of method of greening the city more. Even though the city of Copenhagen seems quite green, it isn't related to London, like in amount of green, or related to Malmö. That's just opposite the bridge. What?
Or Vienna.
Or Vienna. Is Vienna very green? No. Okay.
It depends on the distribution. There are large green, there's a large percentage, but it's the way it's distributed on the cityscape. Yeah. I think it's also different. But the first question, I think, was related towards like social organization and security and conflict and stuff like that.
Well, in that respect, I mean, it's a little hard to answer because it differs so much from project to project. But in general, we are trying to get the discipline of anthropology and sociology into the process, so we don't, just say, okay, in the end, now it's safer, but we know how to navigate in a certain area in order to get the aspects as a starting premise, so you can follow it up and you can make it even better. So, I mean, for Gellerup, the key issue was to create a safe outdoor space. And you don't only do that by illuminating it. I mean, that can even sometimes make it more unsafe, because it glares and it blinds and so forth. Yeah, I don't know how to exactly answer your question, to be honest.
Subculture groups can go Rückzug or something that
if there are niches and like
if they're niches,
like,
definitely. Yeah, definitely. I mean, in Kellogg, there's like spots where it's optimized for women, young women, and where to sort of get like, but you always have like a visual connection between spaces, so it's never blocking. You never have a blind spot. That's how we designed the series of spaces in that park. So you don't have like exactly there. You do have like opstammede træer. I don't know how to say that, but that you get the trunks are more linear, where you move around. So you actually get like visual. You don't get those dark spots, so you feel unsafe.
And as Mette has been in was in our permanent exhibition this afternoon or this morning, and we talked about the Danube Island, the Donauinsel, which is like a very classical project in Vienna, which is also part of our permanent exhibition. Whoever hasn't been to visit our permanent exhibition, a lot of young people here, you have to go. You see the Danube Island and many other projects, because we have some very interesting examples of creating this niche and allowing different scenes. So I think it's still a very valuable case study, also the way it developed. But
there are movies on the website of our institute, interviews of people who have created the Danube Island.
That's fantastic.
So if you like to go into that, you could do that.
Yeah.
So to advertisement now, and I think we stop adverting ourselves and just wrap it up now. We ran quite late, but it was a lovely evening. It was a very interesting evening. I think.
Very much. Also for me. Thank you for all the good questions.
Thanks all of you such a lot for coming.
I would just add a short advertisement too, if that's possible.
What?
A short advertisement, if we are.
A short advertisement?
Because because there was this lovely debate now about landscape architecture, and of course there is a lot of youth who is interested in landscape architecture. At the Ögler, at the Austrian Association for Landscape Architects, we have a kind of Friday bar on the 25th of November in Stumpergasse at the Haus der Landschaft, where we'd like to extend those debates with the youth, and hopefully we bring the landscape architecture forward here in Austria. Sorry for the advertisement, but it would be lovely to see. And not the oldly grumpy landscape architects here from Austria.
So go there. Thanks a lot.